What is the best type of shield from history? Well, that was the topic of a recent video by my mate Scalagrim. Link below to his video. Excellent video there. But it raised another interesting question for me, and that is, let's look again at why were some shields boss gripped and some were strapped to the arm. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatore, and as mentioned there, Scal recently did a video, really good video, looking at the overall context of different types of shields and how do we kind of decide which is the best shield. Well, obviously it's impossible to say which is the best shield. It depends on which shield for which context. Big ones, small ones, different materials, boss gripped, strapped, long ones. All different things that might be used in battle, might be used in civilian self-defense, might be used for one type of army which fights in close formation or another type which fights loosely apart. So there's many different reasons, not to mention technology of materials as well. But what it really interestingly raised for me was it gave me some extra thoughts to come back to the question of why did boss gripped shields and strapped shields be more or less popular at different times. One did sort of take over from the other one in certain aspects, but then boss grip shields never went away. Why? What are the advantages of each? But before we get into that, I'm going to have a quick word about my sponsors for this video, the amazing Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is the enormously, massively popular turn-based fantasy combat game that you can play on your phone or PC. And if you love medieval fantasy RPGs and you like playing on your phone, Raid is for you. Over 700 champions to collect. Also, you've got dungeons, you've got arena battles, tournament leagues, all kinds of stuff. You've got tons of things you can play in Raid. I wonder if I could undergo a metamorphosis and become a more powerful version of myself. Well, if you found that metamorph cool, then wait until you see what the mythical champions can now do in Raid Shadow Legends. Mythical champions are basically two champions in one. You can change between forms with unique metamorph skills. You can summon these awesome mythical champions with the new primal shards available in the game. Both the mythical champions forms use the same artifacts, accessories, masteries and blessings, so be careful which ones you choose. These mythical champions are the most versatile champions ever seen in Raid. For new players, you can get your hands on Stag Knight, one of the most epic champions around, as well as the skin for Stag Knight designed by John Tron. Just use the promo code JTSKIN before October the 7th. It's as easy as that. And don't worry if you're not a new player, you can still get your hands on the Stag Knight through an in-game event. And wouldn't everybody love a free legendary champion? So check out Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from Chinese mythology, Raid's version of it. You only have to log on 7 days between now and October the 23rd to get hold of it. No demons to slay or any difficult missions, just log on 7 days between now and October the 23rd and you'll get your champion. So if you haven't played Raid yet, now's a great time to jump into the game. All you need to do is click on my description below or check out the QR code on screen. And you'll get some insane bonuses, including the epic champion Drake from the Lizardmen faction, and other useful things like energy refills and skill tomes. Once you're in game, you can find me, Captain Context, maybe join my clan. Just click that description, scan my QR code, get playing for free, and I'll see you in game. So thanks for sticking with me. Now let's get back to the main content of this video. So, as I mentioned, Scal did a great video looking at all the pros and cons of different types of shields. I'm not going to cover all of that ground here other than to say, yes, there are flat shields, curved shields, big shields, small shields, wide shields, long shields, gripped, strapped, all different types of shields for different purposes. And clearly some of them, like a buckler, is far better for wearing and walking around in the street with than something like a large shield or a Roman scutum. However, if you're going to form a testudo shield formation, then clearly something like the Roman scutum here is absolutely fantastic for its intended job. And Scal covers all of this really well, so I'm not going to go over that. But while looking at this video, he was giving different examples of why certain shields are better for certain things than others. I'll just grab a different one here. So this is a steel rotella, completely different material. These come later. And indeed, there were types of these that could be made even bulletproof, and some of them which even had guns in them. I have promised to do a video about gun shields at some point, and I will do. But then I was thinking as he was talking about this whole strapped versus boss gripped. Now, to set the context here, the usual explanation is this, is that generally speaking, gripped shield, boss gripped shields are more maneuverable, okay? They're more maneuverable. They're perhaps better in single combat for that reason. They can be held out further from the body, which might be better against certain types of missile weapon, for example, or for other potential purposes we'll come back to in a minute. But one of the main reasons, certainly if you look in history books, that's given, why did the Anglo-Saxons, for example, at the Battle of Hastings, they all pretty much, not all, but a lot of them had boss-gripped shields, okay? And then along come these people called the Normans over here with their strap shields. Now actually their strap arrangement wasn't quite as shown on this shield, but nevertheless anyway, and a guige. And a lot of people say, it's because of cavalry, okay, because of mounted horseback use, because people say that you can have this on your arm and still hold the reins of the horse, and that this is a better arrangement for cavalry. And indeed, on superficial looking, that might seem to be true because strap shields hung around for knights, if we call them that, men-at-arms on horseback, for a long, long time. So strap shields indeed do seem to have some kind of relationship with cavalry. But here's the problem. That wasn't always the case, actually. If we look at certain Moorish and Spanish shields, they were gripped. Okay, and used by cavalry. If we go back to the Roman period, we get flat versions of Roman shields, usually oval, that were gripped and used by cavalry. And in fact, if we look in the Frankish era, for example, Charlemagne's army, very prominent cavalry, had shields and they were boss gripped. So the fact is that boss gripped shields were sometimes used by people on horseback. They might not be optimum, they might not be the best, but nevertheless you can put the reins in the hand and you can still maneuver the horse and have the shield there. Potentially you can drop the reins and just steer with your legs in a moment if you need to. And you can still have a guige strap, you can still have a suspension strap attached to boss gripped shields. So that's something we find on strap shields and on boss gripped shields. So basically, I think that the cavalry answer doesn't really fully answer the question. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I don't think it's a catch-all answer. I don't think that strap shields necessarily only became the most popular types of shields in the High Middle Ages, shall we say, the kind of 12th, 13th century, because of cavalry, although I think that's a factor. And here's the other thing I thought about, okay? This is the thing that might, or might not, blow your mind, okay? So let's think, I was trying to think. So boss gripped shields were popular right the way through the ancient era. There were some places that had forms of strapped shield, but overall, forms of boss gripped shields were the most popular right the way through the ancient era, whether we're looking in ancient Britain or Rome, obviously, Gaul, wherever, okay, Africa. And as we get through the early Middle Ages, the boss grip shield is still the most popular, okay? So right the way through the migration era, through the Viking era, all the way up to about 1000 AD. And even in 1000 AD, there are still a lot of people using boss grip shields. Now this is where it's related to cavalry, possibly, but not necessarily in the way you think. What we see after 1000 AD is, yes, we see an increasing use of cavalry, but there's also, therefore, some different ways that infantry operate, okay? Now, one of the things that also happens at this time is an increased prevalence of armour, okay? We start to get people armoured from head to foot. So I'm thinking, okay, so there's more cavalry around, there's more armour around, but also at this time, boss grip shields start to fall out of favour as strap shields come in, even for people on foot. So even the people fighting on foot are using these shields. Even people who, you know, not dismounted horsemen, but people who are intended to fight on foot start using these shields. And then I thought, is this got something to do with the weapons being used and the armour? So if you think about it, in what have the ancient era and the early medieval period got in common? Quite simply that the principal weapon for people on foot is pretty much always a spear. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the Romans or whether you're talking about Gauls or whether you're coming forward into the migration era, early moving Germanic tribes, Franks and Alemanni and people like that. The spear is the principal weapon on foot. Yes, swords existed, but they were relatively rare in that period and more for elites. Swords became much more common rather, after 1000 AD. And so did armour. Now, how those two things correlated? Well, the simple fact is that armour protects you in your nether regions better against spears. And then I remembered something. Sparring experience. So that's the other thing here. So rather than just looking at the historical artifacts and the art and everything else we know about history, you've also got to bear in mind experimental archaeology, if we want to call it like that. In my case, HEMA. So what I have found is that when opposing polearms with a shield, I find that if you have a strapped shield that's fairly close to your body, it leaves you quite exposed both above and below. This shield can move around less and it's closer to your body and your legs are exposed. I consider that's probably one of the reasons that the Norman shield actually was so popular when it was, because it protected the legs. And we also know there's a correlation between armour getting more full covering, for example getting leg armour, chausses of chainmail, and the adoption of shorter heater shields. So if the size and shape of the shield is related also to the armour being worn, which we know it was, but also the use of weapons, then as the spear starts to become less dominant on the battlefield, strapped shields now become the preferential choice, even fighting on foot in hand-to-hand combat against swords and axes. And then I thought, do you know, there's a modern parallel we can make here. Let's look at bowhurt. Okay, now I don't talk a lot about bowhurt because I've never really had a lot to do with it, but I know people who do it, people who compete in it, and there's an interesting trend in bowhurt. And that is, if you look at any bowhurt competitions, the standard type of shield is a strapped shield. There is nothing to prevent people from using bucklers or boss-gripped shields, targes, but they don't really. Even the small punching shields that they use are strapped. Now, one of the other things you notice about bowhurt is the weapons being used, for the most part, are striking weapons and are quite short weapons. Short swords, falchions, axes, things like this. And in this situation, this is essentially a big old cover to hide behind and punch with. Okay, so the strap shield works perfectly for that. The boss grip shield here arguably isn't quite so good in that situation, but here's the thing. My experimentation suggests that boss grip shields are better against spears, quite simply because one of the things you want to do against a spear is cross the spear as far away from your body as possible. By extending the shield out here, it gets the cover far, far away from you and means that if the person goes low to your legs, you can still bind down due to angulation. By only moving the shield this much, you can still cross and cover the spear and then charge in on the spearman. So whether you're using a spear or a sword or an axe or anything else, the fact is that the boss gripped shield enables you to engage the spear further from your body. The strapped shield, you can't engage very far from your body, and very often it's held here anyway, but even with if you've got a guige attached, you can't move very far. You can't engage the spear so far from your body, and therefore if a person goes low down at your legs, you're very vulnerable if you don't have armour on your legs. So, this is not necessarily a fully formed theory, but I think there's something to that. I think there's a correlation. Like many things, it's not a simple answer. I think that cavalry definitely plays a part. I think that armour plays a part. But also, I think very importantly, and this is also connects back to armour, the use of spears plays a part. Why did the Romans use boss grip shields instead of strapped shields when they're so big and heavy? And actually, if we look at gladiatorial art, I think we might have our answer. If you hold the shield close to you all the time, it can actually make you quite vulnerable to people getting around it with various weapons. If we look at gladiatorial art, we'll often see the shield held out here to engage other people's weapons and parts of their body and even hit them with the shield. So this is more versatile, even if it's more tiring. But bear in mind, these are Roman soldiers. They trained a lot. They lived for this stuff. Okay. So there we go. Some thoughts. And I hope this is a useful appendix to Scal's video, because I personally think there's something in this. I think that the use and prevalence and usefulness of spears attaches to the use of boss gripped shields as opposed to strap shields. And when armour means that you don't necessarily need to worry so much about spears, that's what enables you to use strap shields more, and strap shields are probably better in close-in melee against swords and axes and stuff like that, especially if you're wearing armour as well, and we see this reflected in Bohurt, modern Bohurt sport. Your thoughts, welcome below. Is this complete rubbish? Is this partly correct or completely wrong? You're welcome to post your comments below. I'm looking forward to seeing your views on this. And once again, thanks to Scal for his video, which spurred me into making this one. Really good video. Check out the link below, and I hope I'll see you back on the channel soon. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.